Imagine this for a second. Thousands, maybe tens of thousands of tiny bats. And each one has this miniature bomb strapped to it, and they're being dropped over a city.
Feels like something out of science fiction, doesn't it?
Totally. Or picture a dog, specially trained, running towards an enemy tank, but it's carrying explosives.
Crazy ideas. But, these weren't just fantasy. These were actual concepts explored during World War II.
Exactly. Welcome, everyone, to the Deep Dive. This is where we grab a whole stack of sources, articles, research papers, maybe even your notes, and really dig in.
Yeah, we sift through it all to pull out the key insights, the stuff you really need to know.
Think of it as your shortcut to getting up to speed on some pretty fascinating, sometimes, frankly, weird topics, hopefully with a bit of fun along the way.
We definitely aim for that.
And, we're really thrilled to be part of the All Sorts Podcast Network. It's this amazing space, this community, really, that's all about exploring.
Absolutely. Digging into those hidden corners of history, science, culture, you name it.
We're always chasing that spark, you know, those moments where things just click, the aha moments. If that sense of discovery excites you, if you love learning new things, then honestly, you've found your people here.
We'd love for you to join us on this journey. Please do like, share, and subscribe to All Sorts Podcast right here on YouTube.
Yeah, definitely. And check out the other deep dives and shows we've already put out there. There's a ton of great stuff. Plus, follow us on X, Instagram, and Threads to stay connected. It's just this constant stream of fascinating stories and knowledge.
A whole universe of curiosity, really. Jump in.
Okay, so for this deep dive, we're focusing on something truly out there. Unconventional animal weapons from World War II. We've gone through the sources you brought us.
Mm-hmm.
And the mission is basically to unpack these bizarre ideas. Like, why did anyone even think of them? How far did they get with testing? And ultimately, why didn't most of them, actually get used in combat?
Right. This dive is really tailored from the material you provided.
So, setting the stage a bit, World War II was, it was a technological arms race, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. A war of technology, science pushed to its limits. Both sides were desperate, just desperate for an edge.
And that desperation led to some pretty wild ideas.
Exactly. You have the huge world-changing things like, the Manhattan Project. But alongside that, you have research into things that seem almost unbelievable now. Pigeon-guided missiles, for instance, or these animal weapons. They were exploring everything.
And probably top of that list, based on the sources, has got to be the American bat bomb. Project X-ray, they called it.
That's the one. Project X-ray. It's probably the most famous or infamous of these animal projects.
So who was the brain behind this? It couldn't have been a military strategist, sure.
You'd think not, but no. It was, get this, a dental surgeon, Dr. Little S. Adams.
Wait, a dental surgeon? Seriously?
Yep.
A dentist?
Okay, wow. So where does a dentist get the idea for weaponized bats? Well, the story goes, according to the sources, he was visiting Carlsbad Caverns in New Mexico, saw millions of bats flying out at dusk.
Okay.
And apparently that sparked the idea. Capture millions of bats, attach tiny fire bombs, drop them over Japan from planes.
And the goal was, what? Just chaos.
Pretty much targeted chaos. The thinking was the bats would fly down and roost in buildings. Japanese cities at the time had loads of wood and paper structures.
Right, very flammable.
Exactly. So tiny time fuses on the bombs ignite, maybe using napalm, and suddenly you have thousands of small fires starting simultaneously deep inside buildings all across a city. Adams thought it could cause massive firestorms, maybe even more effectively than conventional bombing, perhaps with fewer initial casualties, though, a citywide firestorm is still horrific.
Yeah, that's chillingly logical in a way. What did the leadership think? Did anyone take a dentist with bomb bats seriously?
Surprisingly, yes. President Roosevelt himself apparently reviewed the idea. He wrote a memo calling it a perfectly wild idea, but it's worth looking into. And crucially, he added that Dr. Adams was not a nut. That little note basically gave the project the green light for research.
Wow. Okay. So they needed a bat. Not just any bat, I guess.
No, they needed the right bat. And the sources say they landed on the Mexican free-tailed bat.
Why that specific one?
A few reasons. Availability, mainly. There were millions upon millions, like 20 million estimated in just one cave in Texas. Easy to catch in large numbers.
Okay.
And critically, they were strong enough. These bats weigh maybe 9 grams, but tests showed they could carry loads up to, say, 18 grams, okay, more than their body weight. Any heavier, like 22 grams, they tested, and they struggled to fly properly.
And they roost in buildings.
Yeah, they naturally seek out dark, sheltered spots like eaves and attics, perfect for the plan.
Okay, so bats selected. Now the bomb.
Huh.
Tiny bombs. Who makes those?
That job fell to Dr. Louis Pfizer.
Pfizer. That name sounds familiar.
It should. He's the inventor of napalm.
Ah, right. Of course.
So yeah, he was tasked with developing these miniature incendiary devices using napalm, that very flammable gelled gasoline mix light enough for a bat to carry.
Okay, so they've got the bats, they've got the tiny napalm bombs. How do you deliver thousands of bats over a city? You can't just open a cage on a plane, right?
No, they had a specific plan for that too. The idea was to pack the bats, maybe 1,000 at a time, into these special cluster bomb-like canisters.
Hibernating, I assume. Chills.
Exactly, chilled into hibernation. Then you drop the canister from a bomber, like a B-24. At a set altitude, the canister opens up.
And out fly the bats.
Out fly the bats, warming up, waking up, and hopefully heading for the nearest roosting spot with their little surprise packages.
Okay, theory sounds elaborate. How did the actual testing go? I'm guessing not smoothly.
Oh, not at all smooth. The sources detail a lot of problems. Early Army tests, May 1943, places like Moroc Lake. Bats chilled for transport didn't wake up properly, just fell, pretty much. Or they'd wake up, fly off, but just away. Not exactly precision targeting.
And wasn't there a rather significant incident? Something about an airfield.
Yes, the Carlsbad Army airfield incident. That one was memorable. They had an accidental release of bats that were already armed with live incendiaries.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes. The bats did exactly what they were supposed to do, unfortunately. They roosted in the brand new base facilities.
And the bombs went off?
The bombs went off, burned the place down, control tower, hangars, barracks. Even a general's car apparently went up in flames.
Wow. So I guess that proved the concept worked in a disastrous sort of way.
It definitely proved the incendiaries worked and bats would roost. But it massively highlighted the control problem. Huge issue. After that, the project got shifted to the Navy and Marine Corps, got the new name Project X-Ray.
Did they have better luck?
They had more success in later tests, yeah. Dugway Proving Ground in Utah, December 43. They used refrigerated containers, simulated Japanese village setups, and they actually managed to start significant fires. The sources mentioned some fires were serious enough they needed professional firefighters to put them out, so progress.
But still challenges, I bet.
Oh yeah, ongoing issues. The surgical clips they used to attach the bombs sometimes damage the bat's skin. Not great if you need them to fly.
Right.
The cardboard cartons inside the main bomb casing didn't always release the bats properly. The time delay fuses needed more work. And confirming that weight limit was key. Those tests with 22-gram dummies showed the bats just couldn't handle it. They'd land too soon.
So after all that effort, 2 years, millions of dollars, why was it ultimately scrapped? It sounds like they were getting closer.
They were, but too slowly. The sources say about $2 million was spent a lot back then, but it was canceled in late 44 or maybe mid-45. Two main reasons pop up.
Which were?
One, just the slow pace. It probably wouldn't be ready for combat until mid-1945 anyway, but the killer blow really was a Manhattan Project.
The atomic bomb.
Exactly. As one official involved apparently put it, basically, why fiddle with bats when you have the A-bomb? It just completely overshadowed Project X-Ray.
Makes sense. A $2 billion project versus a $2 million one with vastly different potential impacts, I suppose. But Adams, the dentist, did he just give up on the idea?
Not really. He reportedly still believed his bat bombs could have been devastating, maybe causing wider destruction than an atomic bomb. Initially, he talked about a potential 40-mile fire circle per drop, and he argued it might cause fewer immediate civilian deaths.
That's a complex ethical argument, especially given the firebombing of cities like Tokyo and Dresden that did happen.
Incredibly complex. And the sources note the Navy later classified bat bombs as inherently indiscriminate, which points directly to those massive ethical problems with weapons you can't precisely control, especially involving fire in civilian areas.
So the bats were the big one, but not the only weird animal weapon idea, right? The sources mention others.
Definitely not the only one. The Soviets had their own program, anti-tank dogs.
Anti-tank, the dogs. How did that work?
The concept was, well, grim. Train dogs using food rewards under their own tanks during training to run underneath enemy tanks on the battlefield.
Okay, and then?
Strap explosives to the dog's back with a lever sticking up. When the dog runs under the tank, the lever hits the tank's underside, boom.
Oh my God. That's awful. Did they actually use them?
They did, starting around 1941, but it had huge problems. For one, they trained the dogs on Soviet diesel tanks. German tanks mostly used gasoline.
Different smell.
Different smell, different sound. The dogs were often confused, or worse, attracted back to the familiar Soviet tanks. Plus, the noise and chaos of battle terrified many dogs.
So they'd run away?
Run away or run back to the Soviet trenches, sometimes with the bomb still active, caused friendly casualties. Unsurprisingly, the troops apparently hated the program, found it cruel and unreliable.
I can imagine.
Yeah, and the Germans used it for propaganda. Soviet claims of destroying hundreds of tanks with dogs are heavily disputed by historians. Use dropped off pretty fast after 1942, just too unpredictable, too problematic.
Wow, okay. And the British. They had something equally strange, right? Exploding rats.
Yes, the SOE Special Operations Executive. Their idea was inventive, I'll give them that, stuff dead rats with plastic explosives.
Okay, why?
The plan was to leave these doctored rats in places like German factories near coal piles for boilers. The hope was a worker would find the dead rat and just shovel it into the boiler furnace along with the coal to get rid of it. The heat triggers the explosive. Boom. Sabotage.
That relies on a lot of assumptions about German coal stokers. Did it work?
Well, no. Not as intended, anyway. The very first shipment of these rack bombs was actually intercepted by the Germans, so they never got deployed properly.
It's a complete failure.
As a direct weapon, yes.
Yeah.
But here's the twist. The sources say finding that shipment had an extraordinary moral effect. The Germans became paranoid. They started massive searches for exploding rats everywhere.
Huh. So it worked as psychological warfare, almost by accident.
Kind of, yeah. Caused disruption and wasted enemy effort based on a fear of something that wasn't actually happening on any scale. A very weird, unintended consequence.
These animal schemes really show the creative lengths people went to. Fits with other weird weapon ideas from the era mentioned in the sources, too.
Absolutely. It wasn't just animals. You had things like the British Panjandrum, that giant rocket-propelled explosive wheel that basically just spun out of control in tests. Looked terrifyingly chaotic.
I've seen footage of that. It's wild.
Or Project Habakkuk, the plan for aircraft carriers made of ice mixed with wood pulp. A giant iceberg carrier. Technically feasible, maybe, but rendered obsolete by longer-range aircraft and other tech before it could happen. They all show the same pattern. Desperate times, unconventional thinking.
So when we look back these projects, these footnotes in military history, why should we care? What's the takeaway from bomb bats and exploding rats?
I think they tell us a lot, actually, about the sheer pressure cooker environment of total war. How it drives innovation, yes, but also pushes ideas right up to and sometimes over the edge of absurdity.
And the gap between theory and reality.
Exactly. That's crucial. An idea can sound plausible, even ingenious, on paper. But then you introduce real-world factors. Animal behavior, battlefield chaos, simple physics, and it falls apart. It highlights the importance of testing, of confronting theory with practice.
And maybe something about how quickly technology moves on.
Definitely. The bat bomb being overtaken by the atomic bomb is a prime example. Even a weird but potentially viable idea can become irrelevant overnight because of a bigger breakthrough. It shows how tech development isn't always linear.
So, distilling it all down, what are the key lessons here from this dive into the sources?
Well, I'd say first, that stark gap between the drawing board and the battlefield. Second, the serious ethical questions raised, especially around indiscriminate weapons. The Navy's own label for the bats says a lot. Third, how desperation fuels unconventional, sometimes flawed thinking. And fourth, how